I've been a Dynasty Warriors fan ever since I was a kid, starting with Dynasty Warriors 3. And since then, I've played every mainline release, as well as the Extreme Legends and Empire versions. So you'd think that with the details of Dynasty Warriors Origins being dropped, I would be eager for yet another installment of the Dynasty Warriors series. Yet I can't help myself feel guarded over whether or not Koei can actually deliver a satisfying project, especially after the latest attempts in reinvigorating the series with Dynasty Warriors 9 or the Samurai Warriors 5 reboot. I do think the Dynasty Warriors formula needs to be changed, but the last game that I truly and wholeheartedly enjoyed was Dynasty Warriors 5. It's not that I hated every release afterwards. In fact, I can make a list of some aspects I enjoyed out of the latest installments, including 6 and 9. However, with each one, I felt that the negatives of each just detracted too much in terms of enjoying the game to its fullest. I'd constantly find myself saying, "This combo string is really fun, but why is half the cast reduced to clones?" Or, "I really like the more accurate narrative to the storytelling, but why is the enemy AI completely brain dead and reduced to unmoving cannon fodder?" And after watching the showcase of what we have so far for Origins, I yet again find myself saying, this is really cool, but why this? So in this video, I'm going to go over what I liked about Origins, what I'm concerned about, and what I'd like to see happen. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. So starting off with the good, the director stated that Origins will have a heavy emphasis on the narrative and storytelling of the Three Kingdoms. This is one aspect that I feel Dynasty Warriors has improved upon with each installment in the series, and a greater focus on using dynamic cutscenes to tell the Three Kingdoms story will be much more refreshing than listening to a bunch of models stand around and talk at each other, or sit in an in-between debriefing screen to get the context. It makes it feel less arcade-like and more like playing out a full-fledged RPG, and is what I'm excited for how that develops in the future. Maps are back and they are bigger in scale and look absolutely gorgeous. I think Dynasty Warriors 9 had a great idea with their open world format, however their execution was beyond abysmal. It was so negatively received that I highly doubt they will ever attempt it again, which is a bit of a shame, as I really do think an open world for Dynasty Warriors can be done. However, it does seem like they are returning to what they are familiar with and putting the time and effort to really make the map stand out. The music was a certified banger. Hearing a modern remix of Eve from Dynasty Warriors 4 took me back 20 years when I was desperately fighting the enemy when the tides turned against me. I'd love to be able to hear some of the best tracks from the older games make a return for the first time with an updated remix. New character designs look great. The newer character designs for the cast feel refreshing compared to some of the flamboyant and gaudy designs of the past games. The art direction looks to be taking a more grounded approach, and I do have to say I do prefer the hot supermodel Zhang Jiao over the raving lunatic wizard Zhang Jiao from the previous game. And it is a little difficult to tell with the newer character designs, but some characters like Guan Yu, Liu Bei, and Cao Cao look to be portrayed younger than their previous iterations. Koei has tinkered around with aging models in their Samurai Warriors games, so maybe they'll do the same here as we progress through the Three Kingdoms story. The enemy density is visually stunning. You really do get the feel that you're in a chaotic battlefield with hundreds of models on screen around you. In the latest titles, Koei has struggled with enemy AI in favor of cramming more bodies on the screen for a grand spectacle. But judging from the battle gameplay, there seems to be a morale mechanic that will influence the aggressiveness and abilities of not only officers, but peon AI as well. Combat looks to return back to the tried and true combo strings of the older games. The innovation instead seems to stem from a greater emphasis on blocking, parrying, and dodging, much like you would find in an action RPG. In addition, the main character does appear to be able to wield different weapons, so players will be able to choose from the different movesets that fit their personal preferences. And it did seem like you'll be able to swap to other named characters, however the presenter did say it would be in certain battles under certain conditions, so I don't think it's going to be as frequent as everyone is hoping it to be. The overworld is an interesting concept, and it seems like it's going to replace the base management or prep menus from the prior games. There wasn't much else info to gain from what was shown, but it sort of reminds me of the campaign map for the Total War 3 Kingdoms. I'll be interested in what more they'll reveal about this overworld, so I can't say much else on it. There's a lot to be excited about from the brief trailers they've shown us so far, but even still, I find myself having some concerns over every positive point I just listed. In terms of its narrative focus, I do not like the concept of our nameless protagonist and the implications it will have on the direction of the story. I don't want our nameless protagonist to suddenly have an influence in the direction of the story and take on feats that would normally be attributed to other characters. There's also the question of whether or not there will be one kingdom perspective or three kingdom perspectives. It's hard to say from what they've shown so far, as all three kingdoms are present in the Yellow Turban and Dongzhuo conflicts, but when Cao Cao and Liu Bei are in the north, Sun Ce is conquering the south. Will we be able to follow the Sun clan form Wu and miss out on the northern province storylines, or will we be locked into a Wei Shu perspective? Do we have to play through the storyline 3 times for each of the kingdom POVs? Or is the story even going to get that far? Then there is also our nameless protagonist not being a custom character. Given that we can name them and they are unvoiced and can use any weapon, it seems like an odd decision to lock them in with their default look. It would actually be understandable if this character was actually a figure of the era, but why stop halfway with a nameless player character? The lack of customization to the player character is a design choice that I just don't agree with. Continuing with the characters, it is expected that the roster is going to be greatly reduced from what it was in 8 and 9, due to its focus on the shorter period. While I am fine with a reduced roster, I am not fine with cloning movesets for most of the cast when the roster is so limited. Samurai Warriors 5 was a top offender of this practice, cutting its roster in half and splitting them up between 15 weapons. But we don't know how many characters are in the game or how many weapons, but given how both Dynasty Warriors 9 and Samurai Warriors 5 were full of clones, it is reasonable to have the same worry in Origins. With a reduced cast, there's also a question of just who is going to be cut as a playable officer and reduced to an NPC. Some characters are just too iconic to not have them playable, such as Lu Bu. But how will that work with the narrative if our only encounters with Lu Bu are at Hulao Gate and most likely Xiapi? Then there is also the question of what happens to the female characters in the game. Are they all sidelined as unique NPCs, or will Diao Chan or Lady Zhen make the roster? These characters, while they may be fictional and have fictional feats within the game, are still iconic to the game's identity. It's far too soon to tell, but I do worry that Origins is going to cut out the playable female characters entirely, or at the very least reduce them to NPCs. And while the battlefields look great and the enemy density is the highest it has ever been, I'm not convinced that the enemy peons aren't going to continue to be folded like lawn chairs the moment we look in their direction. A lot of people seem to be hyping up the handful of attacks they saw from enemy soldiers and claiming a glorious return to the Dynasty Warriors 3 enemy quality, but the character was taking no damage, and the enemies didn't do anything beyond a single attack, unlike the full movesets older soldiers used to have. I can chalk it up to being a demo build, and they didn't want to show the playtester getting murked by a bunch of peons right out the gate, but the single and group attack behavior that was shown doesn't look to be much different than what it was in Dynasty Warriors 8. And just to remind or inform anyone who doesn't know or remember what enemy quality was like in the earlier titles, a major or sergeant could do a full combo string with charge attacks as well as Muso on higher difficulties. You could still run up to them and obliterate them, but being surrounded was far more dangerous than doing the very same in the latest titles. That is yet to be seen here, so I don't agree with the claim that the AI is returning to older titles. As for my own hopes for Dynasty Warriors Origins, I would like there to be some way to play other characters without fulfilling certain battle conditions or being limited to a certain amount of time. I don't simply want to use Shahadun's moveset as a nameless hero, but rather play as Shahadun myself. and I don't want that limited to just 5 minutes in this one battle after fulfilling this one battle objective and then never happening again. As far as characters go, I don't mind culling the robust cast down to the most relevant officers of the time they're focusing on, but I would like to see the Samurai Warriors 5 approach, where certain high-profile officers that were never playable receive unique appearances to highlight their importance. Someone like Hua Zhang, who is only present for one battle, doesn't need to be playable, but he has enough of a mark and presence at Sishui Gate to have a unique model. In that same vein, since they are limiting the scope of the story being told to not be the entire Three Kingdoms story, I'd like to see more prominent figures in the early period have standout appearances, rather than blending in with the rest of the generic fodder you sweep through the rest of the game. Since they are insisting on the nameless hero being the player character who either observes or influences the events of the period, I would really like to see them implement custom appearances. It just seems like an odd design choice to force a random nobody onto the player and not even have a multiple preset option to choose from. For battles, the thing I hated most about Dynasty Warriors 9 was how scripted everything was. Engagements would not occur unless you entered the stage yourself. If you didn't, your allies and the enemy would simply just stand there for all eternity. I hope they do away with that battle flow and actually give the AI some agency. I don't want to have to rush to an officer to trigger some grand charge or rally in every battle, like what we saw with Yuan Shao. I'd rather that just happen naturally as the flow of battle shifts based on your successes and failures and battle objective. As for how long the game lasts, I feel like concluding at the Battle of Cherbi right before the Three Kingdoms start would be a proper finish to an origin story. We all know this is going to be priced at $60, and I think ending at something much earlier just would not be a long enough story to justify a full-priced game. I think the direction of Origins is a much needed change from the standard formula that Dynasty Warriors is known for. However, Koei has always had rocky results when it comes to innovating their mainline series. Dynasty Warriors 9 looked good and exciting from the heavily curated and scripted showcases they put together prior to its launch, and we see how that turned out. For now, I'll remain cautiously optimistic as more reveals come to pass, and I do hope that Origins can knock it out of the park. What are your thoughts on the newly anticipated Dynasty Warriors Origins? I'd be interested to know. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you for the next video.